Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're looking at a truly fascinating collision of two completely different worlds, human infrastructure and wild nature. Specifically, we're going to explore the massive, highly coordinated, and totally non-harmful efforts used by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to keep wildlife away from our most vulnerable places. Seriously, it's a wild world of sensory trickery, psychological warfare, and some frankly bizarre gadgets. Okay, let's dive into this.
So how do you keep birds off a runway without hurting them? It's a very serious question, and it's the core dilemma we're tackling today. Think about it for a second. A flock of geese hanging out near a commercial airport runway? That isn't just a minor inconvenience, it is a critical, life-or-death safety hazard. The exact same thing goes for vulnerable agricultural fields during harvest time or electrical substations where literally one single bird in the wrong spot can trigger a massive power outage. We absolutely need to protect these areas, but we also want to protect the wildlife, right? We need deterrents that are highly effective but totally non-lethal.
Now, when you think of wildlife management, you might instantly picture bears or coyotes roaming around. But the data from the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, reveals something pretty surprising. An overwhelming 99% of the wildlife dispersed in these operations are actually birds. Gulls, vultures, geese, starlings, these guys are the primary targets of the sensory tricks we're about to explore. Mammals and reptiles? They make up just a tiny 1% slice of the entire pie.
And to give you a real sense of the sheer scale we're talking about here, 1,530,615. That massive number is the annual average of birds dispersed by this program. So this isn't just some lone farmer sticking a homemade scarecrow in a cornfield. No way! This is a huge, highly coordinated, data-driven national program that is deploying scientific behavioral modification across the country every single day.
Section 1. Visual Tricks. Fooling Wildlife.
The very first category of defense relies entirely on making an area look incredibly uninviting or downright dangerous. By hanging these highly realistic and honestly kinda grisly effigies, which are basically models of dead vultures and gulls, managers trigger a deep, innate survival response. When a flock sees what looks like a deceased member of their own species hanging around, their instincts just scream at them to stay away. It creates this psychological danger zone that is incredibly effective for dispersing birds from roosting sites.
It's not all doom and gloom, though. Yes, that is the exact same unpredictable, wildly flailing, inflatable air dancer that you usually see trying to grab your attention down at the local car dealership. The USDA actually uses these things to protect places like oil refineries and ethanol plants from huge flocks of starlings. Because they inflate rapidly and whip around in completely unpredictable ways, they're fantastic at keeping birds constantly on edge and away from sensitive ledges.
Now, shifting our focus to that 1% of mammals brings us to a really fascinating tool called fladry. It is so simple, it's basically just a continuous rope with strips of red or orange flagging hanging down every couple of feet, suspended about 20 inches off the ground. But you might be wondering, why on earth does some brightly colored string stop a literal apex predator? Well, it relies entirely on a predator's innate behavioral fear of unfamiliar, novel items appearing in their landscape. It completely confuses them and makes them super cautious.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we mean. Strung up right along a cow pasture fence, this incredibly simple visual barrier becomes a powerful shield for protecting livestock, especially during the highly vulnerable calving season. A coyote or a hungry wolf will literally pace back and forth in front of this flapping red line, totally unnerved by its unnatural presence, and often they'll refuse to actually cross it to attack the livestock. It's a real game changer.
Jumping back to birds, the eye spot balloon is another absolutely ingenious visual trick. These are tough, weatherproof vinyl balloons that swing freely in the wind. But the real secret weapon is the holographic eyes painted on the side. The holographics create this creepy optical illusion, making the eyes appear to follow the birds no matter what angle they fly in from. It perfectly mimics the intense stare of a predator getting ready to strike. That constant swinging movement, combined with an unblinking stare, is deeply unsettling for flocking birds like geese or gulls.
Section 2. Sound Tactics. Auditory Deterrence.
Visual trickery is really only half the battle, though. We also have to use the invisible but incredibly loud world of auditory deterrence. Out on an airport greenbelt, you might find a solar-powered propane cannon. Now, it doesn't fire actual projectiles. Instead, it generates a deafening 120 decibel blast that sounds exactly like a real shotgun firing. It is 100% harmless, but to a flock of blackbirds or waterfowl, it sounds like an active hunting zone.
Just one of these cannons can effectively clear up to 120 acres, keeping airplanes completely safe during takeoff and landing.
Now, if you've ever looked into pest control for your own home, you've almost certainly seen ads for ultrasonic deterrents. But USDA data reveals something pretty crazy. Let's compare sonic calls with ultrasonic ones. Ultrasonic frequencies operate above 20 kilohertz. Well, research clearly shows that, totally contrary to popular marketing, neither humans nor birds can actually hear ultrasonic frequencies. Actually, scratch that. Those ultrasonic plugins are completely useless against birds. Instead, wildlife managers have to rely on sonic calls, sounds within the actual audible hearing range that realistically mimic distress or danger.
So what's actually inside this auditory arsenal? We've got the propane cannons, we've got bioacoustic distress calls, which are actual recordings of birds in a sheer panic that warn other birds away. We have directional sonic disruption, but okay, get this. Perhaps the most surprising tactic on this entire list is scare radios. Seriously, to protect livestock from wolves and coyotes, managers will hook up a radio to a car battery and a solar panel and literally just leave it playing local FM talk radio all night long. Music doesn't work as well, but the varied, completely unpredictable nature of human chatter, the local shock jock, the loud commercials, the interviews, it absolutely terrifies predators.
Section 3. The Habituation Challenge.
The thing is, nature is incredibly smart. We're fighting against something called habituation. This is the behavioral process where animals simply get used to our scare tactics. Eventually, they realize the fake owl isn't actually moving, the loud cannon isn't really hurting anyone, and that weird voice in the field is just broadcasting the morning news. Because of this, wildlife managers are constantly locked in a high-stakes game of chess. To fight habituation, they have to physically move those propane cannons every few days. They have to change up the fladry. They'll mix a visual air dancer with an auditory distress call. They must constantly maintain the element of surprise, or the wildlife will just figure out the trick and completely ignore it.
Section 4. Low risks, high rewards. Now, with a nationwide program of this massive scale, blasting 120 decibel cannons, hanging fake dead birds, and stringing up neon flags across thousands of acres, we really have to ask, just how environmentally friendly is this whole operation? Well, the answer is incredibly reassuring. Looking right at the government's official ecological risk assessment, it states that AETHIS evaluated the potential human health and environmental risks from the proposed use of these non-chemical deterrents and determined that those risks are, frankly, negligible. Because these are strictly non-chemical deterrents, they don't contaminate our water, they don't build up in the food chain. Aside from a bit of noise or the occasional startled non-target bird, these bizarre, large-scale tactics are incredibly safe for both us and the environment. We've seen how a deep, scientific understanding of animal psychology and behavior can protect our airports, our farms, and even endangered species, all without resorting to lethal force. It really is a brilliant application of science. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Knowing just how incredibly well these non-harmful visual and auditory tactics work on a massive national scale, how might you creatively apply a little sensory trickery to keep unwanted wildlife out of your own backyard garden? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep learning, and we'll see you next time.